I'd like to begin the meeting of the Committee of the Whole for the City Council. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Barnes?
Here.
Mr. Bowersox?
Here.
Ms. Chenoweth?
Present.
Mr. Lewis?
Present.
Mr. Roberts?
Here.
Mr. Smythe?
Here.
Ms. Stevenson?
Present.
Mayor Pressing?
Here.
All right. The first thing I would like to ask is if there are additions to the agenda, and I believe there is. Lynn?
Yes, thank you. I handed out a possible motion and a discussion item for your reference tonight, and I would like to request that added on to the end of our agenda, a discussion topic of a possible motion to request the mayor to appoint an ad hoc advisory task force to work with staff to develop a package of new or tweaked ordinances to improve public safety in or near high-density rental units. So a discussion of that.
Okay, we'll put that on at the end of our business of the Committee of the Whole. Yes.
I just have a question on that, on adding that agenda item, and it's not a commentary on the content. Is it possible for us to add an agenda item on the floor without having publicly noticed that agenda item through the Open Meetings Act, and to actually make a motion? I know we can discuss something, but I don't know if we can actually make a motion without having publicly noticed it. Is this, Bruce?
It's a discussion item, so maybe you can clarify that.
Well, I'm not an attorney. However,
yes, we don't have
and we don't have one at the moment. But I do believe that you can have a discussion item on your agenda and add it to your agenda even though it wasn't noticed. You can't take any official action.
And
that's what my understanding
And in
was.
this case, we wouldn't be taking any official action, but we could consider a motion to go before the council meeting, could we not?
That's action.
Yeah, I don't think we can take a motion at this time about anything concerning it,
Okay.
but we can discuss the topic.
That's my understanding, so I just wanted to make sure that we were in compliance with the Open Meetings Act.
So then, part of our discussion could be what motion we would want to make at the next committee meeting. Okay.
That's correct, I think. Okay. That's the only addition that we see, is that correct? Are there any reports from staff at this point?
Just one comment. You will probably receive in this next week some information from staff. We've been working on some strategies to accomplish the council goals, and so you'll receive some information of additional goals and projects that staff is currently working on, and then some strategies on what we might do. So you'll receive that in the next week or so.
Sounds
Just as a
good.
preliminary step.
Okay. And we appreciate being, advised of how the process is coming along and from the staff's point of view. Yes, Mayor Pressing.
I attended the Illinois Municipal League convention and went to a session on the topic that Lynn wants to discuss, which is reducing crime in rental properties. So I have a copy of the Schaumburg Crime-Free Multi-Housing Program, which I've passed out to you all, and this has some discussions of it and also the actual ordinance. What Schaumburg has done is create a program for educating landlords on how to deal with crime issues. There was a very good presentation from a police officer from Schaumburg, Officer John Niebel, and I guess he teaches at the Police Training Institute. And they have an 8-hour program for training landlords, and they have licensing of rental properties, and leases are written so that if there's a crime problem, that's a violation of the lease, and anyone who's creating problems for their neighbors can be evicted. So I think this is something that we'd like to take a look at, and it started in Mesa, Arizona, and a number of communities in Illinois have adopted it, including Normal, so we'll be doing some research on this. My mic is not on?
I'm thinking it's not, yeah.
Well, we'll be studying this.
Okay. Well, it seems very appropriate and timely. Any other staff reports? Are there some more, or yet?
I believe that the police chief passed out a memo, just bring that to your attention on some
Chief Adair's memo?
great efforts by our police department to curtail some of the burglaries that have been occurring in Urbana, southeast Urbana.
Do you want to read that memo, or is that appropriate?
I just brought it to your
Just the
attention.
fact that we have it, okay. Okay, it has to do with various interactions with members of the community and police actions. All right. Next, we have item number 3, the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting of the Committee of the Whole.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Heather Stevens moves to approve, and Mr. Bowersox seconds it. Are there any corrections to the minutes or other changes or discussion? There seem to be none. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye, please.
Aye.
Those opposed? None opposed? The minutes pass. Okay, we have reached now the point of time for public input to address the council. I've got 3 individuals who'd like to do so at this time, and 2 who would like to come to speak specifically to a point later on the agenda. So I invite Laura Huth to please come forward. And please give us your name, your where you live, and explain your business for council.
Good evening, everyone. It's good to be back. I, of course, am Laura Huth. I'm here as Executive Director of Habitat for Humanity. The address for Habitat is 111 North Market in Champaign. I am here with an invitation and good news. Back in June, on a sunny afternoon, Habitat for Humanity broke ground for a house at 1310 West Eads in Urbana. The home is for the Felicia Huff family and her 2 daughters, Brianna and Brashana, both teenagers. Today I'm here to invite you to the dedication of that home. That will be this Saturday at 3 p.m. at 1310 West Eads in Urbana. This project was sponsored by RE/MAX Realty Associates, who raised a healthy portion of the money for the project. I passed out invitations. There's a listing of the donors in kind on that as well. We'd like to thank those donors. And then, of course, Habitat's program uses volunteer labor, so I'd like to thank the volunteers that made that home possible. Ms. Huff and her 2 daughters will be in their home by mid-August mid-October, when they purchase the home from Habitat at cost through a 0-interest 20-year mortgage. So I'd like to extend an invitation to all of you to the dedication ceremony this Saturday at 3 p.m., October 1st, 1310 West Eads. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much also. Next we have Hiram Paley, who would like to speak at this time. Would you please come forward, Mr. Paley, and let us know what your interests are?
Yeah, I'm Hiram Paley. I live at 706 West California Avenue and have lived there since January of 1967. I want to talk briefly about Lincoln Avenue. I haven't had a chance to look at the plans in detail or at, for example, accident rates in complete detail since a lot of this just came to my attention recently. I've had a very busy fall and have not been able to read everything that UNA sends out. But I would be curious about accident rates on Lincoln Avenue. Bruce, do you have those things available somewhere?
We don't have them.
Pardon?
We don't have them with us this evening.
They are available?
Yes.
Yeah, have they changed noticeably in the last several years? Okay, well, yes, I raise this because if you're going to do significant work along Lincoln Avenue, it would be nice to know how things have changed. I sat not where one of you were sitting because we had 14 members of the city council at the time, but I sat at one of the aldermen's desks in the late 60s when we were talking about improving Lincoln Avenue as part of the construction of the Krannert Center. And at that time, I asked the city engineer whether or not we would be able to make left turns out of California Street onto Lincoln Avenue, and he guaranteed me there would be absolutely no problems. There would be lots of gaps. And as you can imagine, from the time that Lincoln Avenue was finished and opened up, those gaps were far between. They do exist, but they're not as frequent as we were promised back in the late 60s, and they're even less frequent today. Of course, on Sunday morning when everybody's in church, you can easily turn left, and at other times, like Thanksgiving Day, when you can easily turn left. But there are times of the day when it's really dangerous to try to make a left turn. I do think a traffic signal at Nevada might improve the gaps and allow us to turn left. But I would like that to be very carefully studied and thought about before you start to pay lots of money to make all these improvements on Lincoln Avenue. I guess somehow I did download that document that was in somebody's, in yours, Charlie?
No, it's on the city website.
No, but I think it was in an email you sent out about downloading.
Brandon sent out the link, yeah.
Brendan sent it out. Well, I did download that, and it's hard to tell as you read it on a computer screen or even print it out exactly what is going on. So somehow I would like to take a good, careful look at this now that I have a little bit more time to do so.
Yeah, I think we can arrange that there would be a place where you could find the information on the plan so that you could look at it and address it if you wish to.
Well, could we get accident rates there and things like that?
Well, I believe we could find out from the police department. I'm sure that there are statistics that are kept concerning traffic accidents on all the different major street corners, and we could find that out, I'm sure.
Well, I know 30 years ago these statistics were kept. I assume they're still kept. I just wonder if there's an easy way I mean, I can always visit the city building if that would
Yes.
be amenable to the police department.
Yes, Mr. Gray.
I could respond just briefly and say that along Lincoln Avenue, we do keep accident rate information. In fact, it's compiled by CUOT staff every year. They look at the high accident rate areas in the city, throughout the city, Champaign-Urbana. And along this particular stretch of Lincoln Avenue, there's none that stand out as far as a high accident rate is concerned when you ask about accident rates. So we're relatively safe if you want to look at rates compared on so many vehicles entering an intersection per accident.
I know traffic is heavier on Lincoln Avenue than it was 30 years ago.
It absolutely is. That's true. Right.
And I just wonder how the rates on Lincoln Avenue would compare with those that existed on Green Street prior to the changes on Green Street and what the rates now are on Green Street, given that they did make these changes a couple of years ago. I mean, I think traffic almost crawls on Green Street, and with my environmental considerations, I don't ask myself about how much gas is being burned because of the changes on Green Street. It must be a lot. But I would be, safety is first, and I would be interested in knowing how the changes on Green Street have affected the accident rates along Green Street. And I think many citizens would before you start pumping a lot of money into these improvements on the other roads.
Well, okay, I think that pretty much covers I believe that the public input session's purpose is to address the city council, and I don't think that in-depth discussion about the topics that are brought up at this point are necessarily part of the public input session. We'd be talking about those at a later point when we get to the item on our agenda. And so I'd like to not have a long discussion about specifics, but I would just appreciate the fact that your input is very important to us.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that policies do change over 30 years. Let me say just a couple of other things. I can't stay till the other part of the meeting because very rarely we have our 4-year, 3-month-old grandson with us, and his father was invited to give a colloquium here today, and I want to go home and spend whatever time I can with him. And finally, I would like to say to Charlie that I think the language and ordinances that are passed by the City Council have always been top-notch when somebody with a good math background has been on the City Council.
Hiram, before you run off, and I won't deviate too much here, I was going to, and basically the question for you is would you be interested in a neighborhood-type meeting once more firm plans are sort of developed and we get, if you have specific questions, email them to me and I'll make sure they get to staff as well, beyond the ones you've already asked tonight.
Yeah, when things are developed more, because I can't tell how far along you are on this planning process.
Well, this is our first discussion tonight, really, of it.
So things might not happen for another year yet, right?
Well, the lights are planned for spring as
Well, that's
part
good.
of the, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
Thank you very much for your inputs. The next individual who'd like to discuss something for the council would be Tyler Fitch. Would you please come forward? Or, oh, no, you said you wanted to address it at the time. Okay, I'll hold your ticket. All right, then that close. Is there anybody else who would like to come forward at this time to address an issue on the agenda? Seeing none,
I just had a brief piece of council input, if that's okay.
that's fine.
That the Urbana Police Department is doing one of their first Thursday programs this month. The first Thursday is the 6th. That is next week, next Thursday, at 7 p.m. That program will be at the Vineyard Fellowship Christian Church on North Lincoln, and the topic will be the IDOT traffic study, the crime scene investigation overview of how crime scene investigations happen, and there will be open questions. So 7 p.m. the first Thursday, October 6th at Vineyard.
Brandon, do you happen to know the location, because it's such a large complex at this point? Do you know, is there a room that people should look for? Because I'd like to get the word out about that.
I don't have a room number.
We can perhaps ask the police after the meeting. Okay.
Yes.
We'll get
Any
lost
other-
for a good half an hour looking for the location.
I'll be there, and you can follow me, because
Okay.
that's where I attend.
You can
church,
help
so.
host
Heather will
us.
be standing in the parking lot directing everybody who arrives.
Okay, you've been appointed.
Okay, that's
All right.
fine.
Is there any other public input at this time from council or audience?
I just going to point out that there are at least 2 members of this body that have degrees from the math department here at the U of I.
Thank you.
So they're balancing,
Math
I guess,
whiz.
the rest of us who have other kinds of degrees. All right.
I started out math and then I quit.
All right, let's move on then to number 5, an ordinance number 2005-09-140, an ordinance requiring payment of a stormwater drainage connection fee relating to a certain tract, PIN number 91-21-06-426-004, and number 91-21-06-426-009, known as the Marathon Tract. And we have input from Public Works, Mr. Gray.
Thank you. What's before you this evening is the recapturing, if you will, of stormwater connection fee for the Marathon Tract. This is about a 5-acre tract up in North Urbana at the location of the southwest corner of Killarney and Lincoln Avenue. And this site was included back in '97 when we looked at a regional detention design. This regional basin serves the properties in that area from Bradley Avenue north and from Lincoln Avenue west to the Park 74 subdivision, excluding the Park 74 subdivision. We're in initial discussions and subdivision and development discussions with this tract of land, and the legal division felt it was important that we would proceed with an ordinance here memorializing that there is a connection fee for this tract. So if and when they do proceed with development and subdividing, that we would be on firm ground in the collection for this amount of money, which is $74,362. What this provides is for the entire 5 acres to be developed and not include any on-site detention basins, which would take up, valuable property, if you will, in this area. And the water is then all conveyed through existing storm sewers and swales to a very large regional detention basin. We call it the North Goodwin Avenue Basin, which is located on IDOT property south of the eastbound Interstate 74 lanes and north of Kenyon Road and just west of Lincoln Avenue. It's somewhat hidden from the pine trees and such in that area. You have to kind of search for it. But anyway, it's a large basin there. So this property was factored into that design, and in using today's dollars, the $74,362 is the appropriate connection fee for this site. Initial discussions with them is they're interested in using off-site detention area in this basin. So be happy to answer any questions.
Yes, Charlie?
Does the existing Marathon station that's there, or the existing, I'm sorry, it's not Marathon, it's the existing gas
Speedway.
station,
Mhm.
Speedway there, have to pay anything currently into this?
No, in fact, the development is for a new such gas station,
It's the
Speedway.
property- Oh, okay.
Mhm.
It's property around it then, okay. And we have leverage because, how, what if they'd refuse to pay, for example?
Then they would have to provide detention on site
Okay, so we have leverage through the zoning and whatever.
through,
Okay.
if they want to provide connection off-site.
Lynn Barnes?
Are they aware of this at this point?
Yes, both the Marathon representatives and the engineering representatives are aware that there's a detention fee, connection fee, yes.
Yes, and Robert?
I'd like Mr. Gray to, since there's a number of math people on the council, I went through the math, and I couldn't make sense out of the dollar amount, but I did talk to Mr. Gray just prior to the meeting that there is additional criteria associated with how this recapture takes place in terms of the initial investment, and I'd just like for him to clarify that to the council.
Certainly. When we looked at the entire watershed, and there's an exhibit in your packet that talks about that watershed area, we look at the land use and acreage and determine what would be the volume of storage in this basin. And we essentially prorate how many acre feet each individual site, how many cubic feet, or we call it acre feet, that each site would need, and proportion that volume from the whole, and come up with each individual property's amount of money to be paid. So, for example, the Holiday Inn and the campus connections and properties like that, Hal Communications, have paid a proportion based on their runoff and storage necessary in that basin. So, as a function of impervious area, the type of land use and the area involved, and following our detention requirements in our subdivision code, those are all factored into coming up with that equation and that number.
If more and more developments paved more and more parking lots, would that ratio change, and would there be a future requirement for like in a larger detention basin due to like heavier runoffs or something?
Actually, this basin was designed for that entire watershed, so it's built for the worst-case scenario of total development.
I see.
With parking lots, rooftops, everything.
Are there other questions for Mr. Gray? Does anybody wish to make a motion?
I would move to forward ordinance number 2005-09-140 on to council for approval.
Second.
Okay, that's Lynn Barnes made the motion, and Brandon or Charlie Smythe made the second. Those in favor of moving it toward council with approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that passes. You forwarded to council?
I'd just point out one thing.
Yes.
Just to point out on this detention basin from a planning perspective, and we haven't done much with this council on this tract, but this was a great use of state right-of-way, because we're using excess right-of-way from the state to serve as the detention facility for this commercial and industrial area. So from a efficient use of land, this was a very unique opportunity for us. And of course, we've had payment from most of the property owners, and so we're just picking up the final few payments. But from an efficient use of land, this was a major positive move for the city.
Sounds good. All right, the next item on the agenda is an approval of the entryway sign policy. And this is a policy that has to do with a new kind of signage in the city. Mr. Gray, could you explain that to us?
Yes. We were approached by the Historic East Urbana Neighborhood Association about the feasibility of an entryway type sign that would be installed in the right-of-way. And this is in contrast to like a subdivision entryway sign that you might see for Behringer Commons or Stone Creek or something like that. To pursue this request, we felt it appropriate to try to draft some policy language and then, of course, discuss with council, as this would have an influence or an impact on potentially other neighborhoods or other areas within the city, too. And wanted to receive your feedback as to the idea, good idea, bad idea, what constraints or what have you. So we have met with representatives from the Huna neighborhood. I've talked to them and met in person and kind of at least got their feelings as to how they would like to see such an entryway sign policy to be implemented. They have ideas in about 5 or so locations within the area immediately east of the city building here as to where they would like to define this neighborhood, give it kind of a sense of place or a distinct location in town. So what we have proposed here is the requesting organization, first of all, would be recognized, if you will, by City Council that it's a bona fide group or area of the community that would be a sufficient size. It wouldn't necessarily be one block in the city, would call itself a certain area, but it's more of a larger kind of a subdivision or larger area within Urbana. Next, we felt that the material costs for the sign, which could easily be $100 or more, would be paid by the requesting entity. We felt that as a city contribution that city staff could install, with its equipment and forces such signs. We felt that it would be important that the location of the sign would need to have input from the adjacent property owner, and that there might be someone vehemently objecting to such a sign placement. So we felt it was important to receive that input. Even though it's in the right-of-way, we wanted to at least have that contact made by the requesting agency or association. So we thought that was an important component. Also, besides the signs requested, again, we felt there would be need for at least an additional sign in the event there was damage or vandalism or theft or something, so that it's readily available. Signs would probably last 10 years. That's kind of a rough length of time, so if and when at the end of that term they needed to be replaced because they were badly faded or the reflectivity was poor or whatever the case may be, we would need to contact the whatever the representatives were, or if there was no further interest, perhaps the signs would just be removed. We talked a little bit about the size of the signs, and if interested, I have an example of what this sign could look like, but before we get into that, I thought I'd get into the policy details first and see if there's thoughts on, is this a good idea, not a good idea, what thoughts might you have?
Before we have the input of council, there is a member of the audience who'd like to speak to this ordinance. So, Tyler Fitch, would you please come forward at this time? Please state your name and let us know why you're here to talk to us.
I'm Tyler Fitch. I'm a HUNA commissioner and a resident of 503 East California, just right over there. I want to thank Mr. Gray for developing this policy, meeting with us, and I want to thank the council for considering this. We think it's going to be something real nice for the neighborhood, and it's going to give us a little bit of identity. Soon we will be confirmed as the best neighborhood in Urbana to live, I think. Maybe there will be an argument, but not tonight, I hope. I did have a couple of questions, too, about the policy, if we could address those, or if we could do that in some time.
Well, I think the purpose is to give us input at this point so I think you could.
Okay.
The debate will continue after.
I think it's a good policy. We're supportive of it. I think we certainly understand why the need to have a policy. I had a couple of specific questions. One dealt with the notification of residents, which is, I believe the way I read it now, the policy just implies that you have to notify by letter or other ways that might be approved by the city. I estimated the cost of what it would cost us to notify all the residents by letter, and I think it would be in excess of $100. We don't have much money, and so I wondered if alternative means such as maybe public notice in a newspaper, possibly posting to an email list might be considered. A second question was the permission requirement of the adjacent property owner. We have discussed this specifically, and I agree that the appropriate thing to do, the neighborly thing to do, is to notify and contact in person the adjacent property owner. We certainly intend to do that. I wondered if notification was sufficient and an attempt to seek concurrence, or whether actually, the way this reads, there has to be permission and proof of permission, I guess, given. A third thing is the replacement signs. How is the number determined? Is there, what are the chances, what's your impression of how subject these signs will be to vandalism and so on and so forth? Is the ratio 2 posted signs to 1 replacement, 3 to 1? And then finally was the part at the end I didn't really understand about replacement of the signs as they wear out, etc. Is this pertaining to the spare replacement signs as well, or just at the end of the life cycle of the signs? So if I could get some clarification on that. Other than that, thanks, and we support the policy. We're looking forward to implementing it.
Okay, are there any questions to Mr. Fitch from council? Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right, and there were some questions or hands raised. It'd be time to have discussion or questions from the City Council for them, Bill Gray, about the signs. Yes, Charlie?
Bill, the one thing I had questioned was that the sign base shall be installed at least 7 feet from the ground. So basically, you want a sign that's up off the ground. Is there a particular reason for that? I mean, why wouldn't we allow something down, like a monument sign type thing instead?
I think it's basically a sign clearance. If we have narrower parkways, or generally there's a 7-foot clearance for people when they're walking in and around parkway areas. We thought a little bit about the monument sign situation, but as we talked to the group, I think we didn't want to do anything too elaborate, so an aluminum blank sign with a face on it with the appropriate HUNA design was what we were thinking of. So we were thinking of a sign like a regular wooden or steel post or a light pole or that sort of thing mounted in a neighborhood area.
Okay, I guess I was thinking, some of the subdivisions have their more monument sign style. Mm-hmm. They have more space for it and such. Should we necessarily not include that possibility here?
I think generally in those situations, they're in outlots and those are large areas. Generally, with our parkway areas, they're much narrower. I mean, sometimes you might have a 10-foot parkway, but we have some parkways that are narrower than that. So to have the space to put a sign that's, say, 3 feet wide or what have you, and space, you like to stay at least a couple feet from behind the curb for various reasons, and not too close to the sidewalk. So I think there's a lot of scenarios, and looking at some of the locations where it could be a tough situation, but we can be open to a shorter sign too. I mean, we can do if the space permits it.
Okay, I guess I would leave a little escape clause there then, if possible.
I guess I have a question for Bill. We we're not seeing a specific sign or proposed sign for this neighborhood association. My understanding is that it's a rather small sign. Maybe the ones that are being requested at this point, maybe you could describe them somewhat. They're on a post, or isn't it a 4x4 piece of lumber mounted in the ground independently? Or
the sign, well, again, it may be on a light pole, maybe a sign post, a 4x6 wooden post. Sign dimensions, we established here 36-inch or so was what we thought would be a reasonable sign width. Lettering, 2-inch lettering or so it's visible as you drive by in a neighborhood setting, appropriate, speeds, 25, 30 miles an hour, it's legible. So we took those sorts of things into consideration as far as the size is concerned.
These are not...
Wanted it to be, fitting, when it, obviously a billboard size, and
right.
So you want an appropriate sign, not too out of place and certainly not too small where you don't see it either. So these dimensions were something we discussed, felt that it was something that would be reasonable as far as dimensions with a residential setting.
I guess I was wondering about some of the qualifying language in the ordinance, proposed ordinance, and I guess that I could make some suggestions. I guess I also had I was wondering about the necessity of getting written permission from the property owner at the location, and whether that was somewhat problematic for a neighborhood association who may or may not know specifically who the property owners may be, and if the purpose is to place signage at the entrance to the area or the subdivision area or whatever these areas might be, does it cause somewhat of an impediment for logical placement if you have to seek permission for each individual sign when it's already been approved? The design and the structure has been approved by City Council in your department. In other words, these are basically approved signs by the city, and now we're having this other additional hurdle or thing to go through to get the property owner to sign off and have proof of that signature. Yes.
First of all, as far as assistance with who the property owner is, that's something we would certainly work with the association. As far as concurrence, we're open. A phone call is fine, email. Just some response that the person says it's okay. We state letter, email, phone call, in-person, contact, something that says it's okay. There are probably good locations that define you are now entering a certain neighborhood, and that's where the sign should go, but I thought it'd be the good neighbor thing to include this sort of thing, because we do run into situations where people object to such sign placements. Okay, so we thought that would be appropriate in this policy, but we can certainly delete it also, and right away is right away, and it's what we think is for the good of the public good, and if someone doesn't like it, we can just say, oh, too bad. I don't think that's what we want to do, but that's one other way to look at it. But no, we would definitely work with the requester at all the locations. We can give them information of who the property owner is. We have that information readily available. We would certainly work and assist in that discussion, in meeting with those people. I don't see this as a major impediment. I just see it as a courtesy contact to let folks know that this is what's going on in case they didn't hear about the request or the newsletter or the email or however the association notifies the people in the area. They're not aware of it. We just want to make sure that they have some kind of contact.
Are you also open to alternative forms of public notification?
Absolutely. And
So
we mentioned any
possibly,
method acceptable, sure.
The ones that were mentioned today.
It's mouth to mouth, just tell folks, or however it is. We just think it's important that everybody is at least given the opportunity to say, hey, this is what we're thinking of doing in our neighborhood. You're part of the neighborhood. And not that there's a vote or whatever, but just, I think there's some kind of contact made.
And finally, what do you think is an appropriate replacement ratio for, if you have 3 signs or 6 signs posted, do you require like 3 additional signs or 4 additional signs?
No, in this case, it'd be just one.
One additional
just
sign?
one, yeah.
Because I think the neighborhood association first did hear about 1, and then it sounded like there would be 3 signs required.
No, we talked about it, and, I mean, again, if 3 of them are removed in the first 6 months, I think we're going to want to replace them,
Yes.
you know, so we don't know. But we just feel that, you know, if one is removed, we're able to respond quickly. I mean, that's typically how we do with other locations. If signs are removed, we like to get them back up quickly. So, again, council input here, if you want no signs as inventory, just keep in mind, if one's missing, it may be, you know, several weeks or a few months to get it replaced just for the ordering process. But if we have one in inventory, it can go up, you know, quickly.
Does your department make these signs
No.
for the neighborhood?
These would be all contracted out.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought they would be created in your sign shop.
No.
I see.
No, this would be contracted work.
Okay, thank you. Okay, are there other questions?
Yeah, I have one brief question. Bill, when you described it, you said that the signs might last 10 years, they might wear out due to fading, and then need to be replaced, and the neighborhood association would bear the cost of replacement. When I read the policy, I just didn't quite see that clearly, and I think we should, you know, be clear with everybody who reads the policy that that's the way it works. Is there, did I miss something, or are you amenable to adding some clarification of that?
Oh, no, that's fine.
Okay, thanks.
Is there any further discussion? Maybe, yes, Lynn.
Isn't that clear in the paragraph right before the last one on the, where it says that the entryway signs require replacement, additional signs shall be provided at the requester's expense? Does that adequately address that, or?
Yeah, if I could, maybe the rough 10-year lifespan helps me get an actual picture of, I mean, yeah, you're right, that does describe it. If we could say that, you know, we expect signs to last something like a 10-year lifespan.
Yeah, it's hard to say 10 on a sign like this, it really is. South exposure, maybe less, north exposure, maybe more. You know, it's just, there's different variables, environmental variables.
Well, yes, go ahead, Lynn.
Well, I would move that we forward this to council with approval, with just a slight tweak in the paragraph on the first page with regard to the size or the type of sign, just so there'd be some flexibility, as Charlie mentioned earlier, with regard to the actual nature of the sign.
Second.
And I would like to add to amend it as well. Well, I guess that's the point of this discussion here, now that it's been moved. Yes, Heather Stevenson. Lynn made the motion and Heather seconded it. Okay, so a discussion on this motion? Okay. Charlie?
I think any additional things you want to throw in are probably going to be accepted as friendly, so
Yeah,
throw
okay.
them in.
Well, I would like to make it clear that a notification of the intent to institute the sign policy, to the notification of the neighbors in the neighborhood association district couldn't be by email, by notification, by public notice in the newspaper, by...
But it says any method acceptable to the city. So as long as the city's good with it.
Well, it's probably wise to indicate it, because it sounded like originally it was by letter that you were expecting people
No,
to...
it doesn't require that here.
Okay. All right. And for every, maybe we could say something like, for every 3 signs that are erected, there should be one sign available for replacement, or every 4 signs, 1 sign for replacement, if you want to help specify how many replacement signs will be ordered.
Yeah, we think 1 is just fine, and I think they're requesting 5 or 6, if I remember right, locations. I think 1 is fine. They're costly.
Yes, they
You know,
are.
they're going to be $100 and some odd so each, so 1 is fine. I can't imagine, I can't fathom a neighborhood somewhere that's going to need 25 of these or something, so, one replacement sign is fine, and And it gives us time, then, if we do need to replace one, we can order another one as another inventory situation and talk to the association about replacement costs and that sort of thing. So I think from a staff maintenance perspective, one is just fine.
Okay, well, that sounds healthy. I don't have anything else more to request. Those in favor of forwarding this ordinance, or this an ordinance?
It's just a motion.
It's a motion to City Council. Please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, it passes. Number 7, a resolution number 2005-09-015R, a resolution determining the amounts of money necessary to be raised by the tax levy in the year 2005.
Good evening. The Truth in Taxation Resolution is the first step in the city's property tax levy. The ordinance will be probably passed in November. This will be the taxes that taxpayers will be paying next May and probably September or August. It's based on the numbers that you approved in the current city budget that you approved in June. What the Truth in Taxation Resolution does is set a ceiling or a maximum amount that the city can levy, and we can lower that amount when we actually get before the levy is approved, but we cannot go above these amounts. What it does is notify the public if there's a chance that the city will have a levy that is above 5%, and it's very probable that we will, almost certain that we will. It notifies the public that we're contemplating that, sets a public hearing time, and allows them to come in and provide some comment.
Yes. Any questions? Danielle?
Yeah, just a quick question. The 12% that you're recommending, does that include Carl? It takes into account, okay, and then status of Pravina in this picture?
Pravina is not in this because Pravina is in the TIF, so we do not levy any taxes for the TIF.
Okay.
But Carl is not, so.
Oh, that's all.
The 12% is really an artificial number. I know that it will be below that. It probably will be somewhere around 9.5%, the actual levy. Of that amount, I would say it's probably going to be split about half between new construction and increases on current taxpayers due to increases in the values of their property. The rate, we anticipate the rate will be the same, $1.31, which it was last year, and is the same as City of Champaign.
Yes, Danielle?
Just real quick, so that we don't repeat what happened with the MTD, which is that they did the same kind of thing. They announced a higher tax rate to accommodate the fact that Carl might not be included, et cetera. And then the News Gazette, I believe it was Phil Bloomer, published an article saying that the tax rate for MTD has gone up, and look at all the money that they're going to spend. So when we pass this, if it could be communicated clearly to the News Gazette that actually this accommodates this is a potential number, not an actual number, and that it accommodates the Carl Hospital. I know that Phil Bloomer is not with the News Gazette anymore, but I just want to make sure that we make it clear to their editorial staff that we're not talking about increasing taxes in Urbana.
Other comments or questions?
I just want to say that prior to our voice vote, that I'll be abstaining from this vote because of a conflict of interest.
Appreciate that. Yes, Ms.
I'd move that we send this resolution to council with a recommendation to approve it.
Okay.
Okay. Motion made by Brandon Barsox and seconded by Robert Lewis. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Those opposed, say nay. All right, it passes.
Then you need to say those abstaining.
Okay. And those who abstain, there is one abstention. Well, duly noted. We appreciate it. You're the silent minority, but it still is important to note, yes. Okay. Okay, number 8, report on employee retention and recruitment. Bruce, do you have something?
I'll just kick this off. This is in response to the council direction that we had a month ago or so, in terms of what we want to do in terms of the appointment list, and then those to be on the list, and the types of contracts that you just saw one of them, actually.
I can't hear you over here.
You just saw one of them. So I'll let Mona go ahead and take it away in terms of what you have before you tonight. If you can find a microphone that works.
When do we get new microphones?
Oh.
We got the money.
Do we have an estimate?
Okay.
The answer from engineering would be 3 months and $100,000, but we're not asking.
Is this one working? Okay. When we met before on this topic, council asked us to do a few things, and one was to finalize the employment agreement that was drafted before, making some specific changes, and we have done that. And actually, you voted on your first employment agreement today with respect to our new planning manager, Robert Myers. So the agreement that can be used for new employees is exactly the same as the one that you approved today for Mr. Myers. The one for the existing employees is substantially the same. I removed, of course, parts about temporary living expenses and moving, since they're already here. A few other provisions about that basically reflect that they're already appointed. But other than that, they're basically the same agreement. The other topic, in addition to the agreement, was the term. And what I just distributed here is a draft ordinance that the council could pass at next council meeting if they wish. That would take care of what I believe was recommended at last time. Right now, if you turn the page and look at the back, right now we have annual appointments and then appointments whenever vacancies occur, and that part is working well. That's the Section 2-42. Under Section 2-43 term, though, the term of the office for which any officers of the city shall be appointed shall be for any period of time not exceeding the municipal year of their appointment, which means that if somebody were to be appointed in June, they could only be appointed till the end of June, possibly a 2-week period. That clearly doesn't make as much sense doing it that way. So Jack Waller and I talked about this, and it seemed like the simplest thing that we could do here is simply give council permission to repeal that language under term and say the term of the office for which any officers of the city shall be appointed shall be specified at the time of such appointment. And that way, if somebody has only 6 months left, as we suggested, you could approve an appointment at that time, for instance, for 18 months to get them back on cycle. And you could decide that, since that has to come before the council anyway, it's not really any more work. When their employment agreement and their appointment comes, the term can just go in the memo as well and take care of that. So if that's what you'd like to see next week, we can do that. And then the next page is an ordinance that would authorize the mayor to sign the employment agreements for the existing appointees that are not being moved to civil service. And then we actually have a list with their names and each of their titles here. And if that goes to council, then she would be able to do that following the approval of this ordinance. The final ordinance that you'll need is the civil service ordinance, which I've drafted but haven't had time yet to ask Jack Waller to review, but hopefully if he is able to review that this week, we'll get that to you at next council meeting as well. That simply removed the provision that division managers had to be appointed, and we'll simply say that they can, those that need to be confirmed will not be in civil service, and those that don't need to be confirmed will be in civil service. That's probably the simplest way to handle that. I would also suggest that we add a 12-month probationary period for all exempt employees. Right now, Most of our police and our fire have probationary periods that are 12 months for fire, over 12 months for police, and really the non-exempt employees would be the hourly paid employees would be the only ones left with a 6-month time under that provision. So that's basically.
Are there questions? Yes, Mayor Pressing.
Mona, you have on the back of the first page, section 2.42.
That's current language.
So you're not changing that, right?
I wasn't proposing changing that.
Well, it's got people in there, like it says, budget director, city attorney, corporation counsel.
We can change that at the same time if you
Director of the
want.
light department. Yeah, so there's some of these positions that no longer exist.
Yeah, I in fact did notice that, and we certainly can change that. The way it's currently written is there may be appointed, meaning that we don't have to appoint those positions, so it's not absolutely required that we clean it up, but I have no problem if, since we're taking 243, that we could clean it up at the same time. Would you like to do that?
Well, what's the difference between city attorney and corporation counsel?
In some, Bruce?
Well, that's a throwback from when we had Ken Beth and Jack Waller. Jack was corporation counsel and Ken Beth was city attorney.
So
it was a different structure.
But we don't call anybody corporation counsel now?
City attorney.
Is it, it's not in the budget or anything?
We budget as city attorney.
Okay, thank you.
So we could remove corporation counsel. We could change the Minister of Community Development to Director, get rid of the Director of Light Department.
And Budget Director.
And, exchange Comptroller for Budget Director. Although Budget Director, I believe, is in the code. But I guess that wouldn't.
Well, we can double check those with the current code.
But we'll make those modifications when they come to City Council meeting.
Does anybody else have questions for Mona?
There's one other item that we have on the employee agreement, which is the standard agreement was used for division and department heads. I also gave a sample for the CAO, which I used the same term, the same notice period, all the same aspects of the other. I cleaned up the language so that the CAO wasn't approving his own, because there's so much reference to the CAO approving this and that. And other than that, it basically stands the same. So you could authorize the mayor to sign that one as well at City Council meeting if you wish. Yes.
I guess I've got a couple of questions. I guess I'll start with the top or something. I guess I don't know a reference here. There's a section 5 called disability in the first appointment contract, and it gets to page 9. FMLA leave.
Yes.
Could you explain that to me?
Family Medical Leave Act is a federal term. We also have a policy that's called FMLA leave. And under FMLA leave, during the period of time you're on that leave, your employer will continue your health insurance benefits, and you will pay your portion, and the employer will pay the normal portion that they pay on your behalf.
Does that include, or should we be wise enough to include maternity leave, or is that handled totally separately?
Maternity leave, if you mean a period of time when a woman is temporarily disabled due to pregnancy or childbirth, would be an eligible FMLA.
So that's a part of that's included in that. And in section 4 on page 16, I'm guessing the termination notice and separation benefits. I guess I'm wondering, I guess we're trying to be comparable to other cities and other municipalities, and I'm not aware, of course, what would be the standard in today's parlance for some certain kinds of notices and notifications. In some jobs you give 2 weeks' notice. In this job, we're requiring 4 weeks prior notice before termination, and then we're adding various number of weeks to a total of 12 required, depending upon how long you've worked with the city.
No, that's the notice that the mayor would give. 4A is the notice the mayor would give an appointee if she or he were to terminate an appointee for other than cause.
I see. So that's what these accumulated weeks
Right.
are
For instance,
about.
Champaign gives severance, but we wanted to give notice instead of severance.
Okay, I see. That helps to me clarify that. I don't know. I guess at this point, I mean, these are pretty complex documents, and I'm not a lawyer. It's not easy for me to judge these. Does anybody else have comments or other questions that they'd like clarified on this? Louis?
In development of these agreements, would it be appropriate to, number one, take care of the acronyms within the context of the document? And the other one, when it comes to municipal codes, would it be appropriate to include them? I'm just asking a question.
Well, you mean to cite the municipal, to
Either
quote the
as-
municipal code?
Either as an appendage to or incorporated if it's not too long.
Well, are you...
So the employee would know.
Yeah, FMLA should just be spelled out.
Yeah, FMLA we can spell out, that's simple. The municipal code could change over time, and we would have to be subject to, the code that is referenced in this document is the state statute regarding municipal requirement. And if that changed, then we would be subject to that change. So I think generally council has recommended against using specific language that's in a statute now that might be subject to change, because then we have ambiguity in the law, not knowing basically where you stand in that regards. But we could make it a practice to copy that section and give it to employees.
Because they would have the reference at that.
But we could give them the current section
But the
at the
language
time.
would specifically specify that that's the applicable code, and whatever changes take place, it would apply over time. If they had a 4-year contract or a 3-year contract, if it changed in the second year, it would still be applicable, but revision A.
Okay, I'm not sure, and I don't know that it's a real long section. Why don't I talk to Jeff Waller about that and see if there's a way?
I know the person, reviewing the document, you don't know.
Yeah, it's probably best just to provide them whatever's current at that time. The problem with putting a code, and we try not to put the code sections in these contracts or similar documents because the code changes from time to time, or the requirements of the state change from time to time. And when they do, then it creates ambiguity in the particular contract as which applies. So we just like to reference the code as it may be amended from time to time. So it's best just to explain up front what the provisions are, and we can do that.
My only concern was that there is change, and I know it takes place, but at the point of signing of the contract, you know exactly where you stand.
Yeah, I think we can handle that.
Okay.
We could do that.
We can advise people. And actually, what this is saying is that even though the code says one thing, this employment agreement is being a little more specific than the code.
Shouldn't they coincide?
Well, the employment agreement is actually clarifying how that statute would apply in this specific situation.
Sounds good.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, would there be a motion?
How many motions do we need here?
We're asking for?
Well,
The ordinance?
you could move to have both ordinances brought to next city council meeting.
Here's the second ordinance.
That's this one here, it's two sides. It's the
Okay.
term and then
Does this become an appendix of this?
yeah.
Does the
The employment
employment
agreement for
agreement?
current employees would be an appendix, and the employment agreement for the CAO would be an appendix.
appendix? Okay.
Right, to
I
the
move
second
I
one.
move to send ordinance relating to the term of city officers with the suggestions regarding Section 242 revisions to council.
Second.
Okay, it was motioned and seconded by Danielle. Discussion?
That's a recommendation for approval, by the way.
Okay, recommendation for approval. Those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Those opposed? Okay, that passes.
Okay, the second motion would be to send to council an ordinance approving and authorizing the execution of employment agreement with amended attachments with recommendation for approval.
Second.
Okay, it's been motioned and approved, seconded by Lynn Barnes. Those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that passes and is going to council.
And then is the third motion, if, Mona, if you're aware that Jack Waller's ready for it, would be that we could direct Jack to bring to council next week the civil service text amendments, or?
Yeah, okay. If they're ready, we'll bring them.
Okay, yeah.
If not, we won't, huh? All right. So Brandon, you made that motion that these be forwarded if prepared, and Charlie seconded. Those in favor of that motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that passes. All right, I guess that takes care of our employment retention contract suggestions. Okay, item number 9, a resolution number 2005-09-016R, a resolution in support of local franchising. And Laura Plessing?
Actually, we have the text for this resolution, but it's going to have to be drawn up in a slightly different format so you can see what the number of the resolution is. But the issue is that our cable franchises will need to be redone because they're expiring, and this is a significant source of revenue to the city of Urbana. But in the meantime, there are several bills in the United States Congress which would take this right away from local governments, and this resolution is to oppose those bills in Congress and to let our elected representatives know that the city of Urbana opposes those bills.
Is there any discussion? Yes, Danielle.
I move that we send this resolution in support of local franchising to council with a recommendation for approval, understanding that the resolution will receive a number between now and then.
It has a number, but it's not written on it.
Okay. Is there a second to that
Second.
motion?
And I have
Yes, in discussion.
I was in Washington, D.C. this last weekend for the telecommunications officers conference, annual conference. I did get a chance to speak to Senator Durbin's aide about this, and he was extremely receptive. I have an email that I'll be sending out to folks about that. I got a chance to basically send him a preview of this resolution saying that it wasn't passed yet to Durbin and Obama's offices. Because of time, I was not able to get to Representative Johnson's office, but I also knew that the mayor had been in contact with his office. So I'll send out updates, but we need to work closely with our representatives on this. Obama's office generally was uninformed about this legislation, so I think it was important that we get in front of that office. Durbin's office had heard a little bit about it from the industry and had not yet heard much from the cities itself, so it's important that we speak up. And certainly, I think this is actually not only essential for our future revenue, but it's also essential for any hope that this city would have in terms of having public access television. Basically, the proposals that are on the table would completely obliterate the ability to have public access TV unless we were going to fund it out of pocket, through operating expenses. There would not be funds for doing such a thing. And I think that the city's not in a position to take that on.
Yes, Mr. Smythe?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a phrase, and I emailed this to everybody. I hope it made it to you. The third whereas from the bottom, I would insert whereas the city of Urbana recognizes that airwaves are a commodity that belong to the public, local franchising, et cetera, et cetera. The mayor would accept
you're
that.
correcting?
No, I'm adding a phrase. You should have received this in your email this morning, unless it didn't make it through.
Okay.
Did people see that?
I received it.
I did receive it.
I received it too, but I wasn't quite sure what you meant
Yeah,
when you
it's
had all
the-
the,
yeah, it was a
the
little-
three dots and the et cetera.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So it goes into the third whereas from the bottom. and it goes right after the whereas. It says, whereas, comma,
Okay.
the city of Urbana recognizes that airwaves are a commodity that belong to the public, comma, local cable franchising allows for cities and towns. So it's just inserting a phrase in there. I was hoping you could, or let's see, we have a if the motioner and the seconder would accept this.
I accept that as a friendly
I
amendment.
accept that.
That does kind of clarify the sovereignty of the city for its own airways, which is useful.
The public.
Public commodity.
Any other discussion?
Given away by the village.
All right, those, we've had a motion and a second that we forward this to council. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that's forwarded to council. Before we begin the CATS presentation, we have a house cleaning item to take care of. In discussion, we've decided that we need to revisit item number 8, the employee retention and recruitment discussion. Mr. Barsox, do you have a suggestion?
Yeah, it came to my attention that because we didn't have the language of the first two ordinances in the packet, and because the third still hasn't even been drawn up, that perhaps we could wait and consider them at committee again in 2 weeks. So I would move to recall that vote. I voted for it originally, and move to keep it in committee 2 weeks from now for further clarification.
You're making a motion to rescind.
To rescind.
I second.
All right. Discussion? Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that motion is rescinded. The item will be discussed again and appear on at the Committee of the Whole in the next Committee of the Whole meeting. All right, we're at the point now, item number 10 on the agenda, the campus area transportation study. We do have 2 individuals who would like to come forward, but I guess we'll wait until the presentation is finished, and then we'll have, before the discussion with the council members, during the debate section, we'll have 2 members approach from the audience and give us their input. So now, if we could have a presentation of the CATS study for city roads. Mr. Gray.
I'd like to introduce 2 people this evening. First, to my left is Mr. Jerry Payak with Clark Dietz. He is the principal author and project manager, and another person in the audience is she's outside, but Ms. Rita Black, who is the transportation engineer for CUATS, the Champaign-Urbana Urbanized Area Transportation Study, and both individuals were very instrumental in what is before you this evening. Tonight we will have a presentation, but I'd like to do a little introduction. This is a topic that has been under study for, quite frankly, about 10 years. It has evolved in various forms, but the CATS Phase 1 and CATS Phase 2 has been occurring here for the last 8 or so years. There has been a lot of both cities and university and MTD and IDOT consultant staff effort into these studies that have occurred to date. And I don't want to minimize the commitments that the past councils and cities and university have made towards improving safety on campus for all modes of transportation. Tonight, we're not necessarily moving forward with a street design per se, but to talk about what all the considerations and recommendations would be. Hence, we're looking for consideration for adoption at council meeting or a future council meeting. So adoption of the report, the Campus Area Transportation Phase 2 report. A specific street change, if there is to be any geometric changes or reconstructions, those discussions would occur at a future meeting. So we want to look at kind of the broad brush of what this report is all about and what we're trying to accomplish to that end. Some of the accomplishments that have occurred over the last 8 years in working with the cities and the university and MTD include, for example, the formal adoption of a university district. That's defined in here, but basically it's Lincoln at the west end and University on the north end. That area, University District, is a defined area. We've had signage, blue, black background type street name signs have been installed to be distinctive to the rest of the cities. There has been various parking policies and fees and fines and such that have been discussed over the last several years to be consistent through the area. There's been speed limit signs that have been installed to get people to slow down, to respect the high pedestrian traffic, bicycle traffic area, congestion in the area. So there's been a variety of things that have occurred to date. The city of Champaign has spent millions of dollars literally in doing a change of streetscape work on Green Street and 6th Street, and they have more such projects in the future. And all those changes and circulation pattern changes have been a result of the CATS 2 phase study. So there's work that has been accomplished. There's much more work to be accomplished, and with that, I'd like for Jerry to give an overview of the executive summary.
Thank you, Bill. I want to go through a brief presentation of where the CATS 2 project is right now, what conclusions we've come to. Again, I want to reiterate, this is broad brush. It's not final design, final detail. There's still a ways to go before such implementation occurs. Why the campus area transportation study? So there were several independent studies that precipitated this some time ago. Back in 1995, there was a Green Street intersection design study which recommended a 5-lane cross-section, 2 lanes in each direction with turn lanes. Well, that would have solved the vehicle delays, but it would also have wiped out all the commercial businesses because there simply isn't enough room to do that. A year later, the Chancellor's Task Force on Campus Safety established the menu but provided no analysis. This was precipitated by a pedestrian fatality on Green Street east of Wright Street. And then there's been many other studies of individual components. Campus Safety Task Force report, Campus 2000 Transportation Traffic and Parking report, U of I Parking Master Plan. There was a City of Champaign downtown and campus parking master plan, and the campus master plan, and more. All individual studies, nothing really bringing it all together is what was trying to be accomplished in the campus area. So when CATS Phase 1 was initiated, the first goal was to establish a university district. This university district, as the map shows, was bordered by University Avenue to the north, St. Mary's Road to the south, Lincoln Avenue to the east, and the railroad tracks or Neal Street to the west. The CATS mission statement, which evolved over time slightly, is to better accommodate pedestrian, transit, bicycle, and vehicle movements in a more user-friendly environment. And there's an importance to this hierarchy. It was debated quite often throughout the study. Pedestrians are first. Pedestrian safety is the main priority, followed by efficiently moving transit, bicycles, and vehicles being last. Project goals. Goal 1 was to improve safety for all transportation modes. Goal 2 was to create a transportation system compatible with the physical environment described in the city and campus master plans. Goal 3 was to improve the operational efficiency and effectiveness of the transportation system in a cost-effective manner. And Goal 4 was to enhance access to the core of the campus area and route traffic through to the fringe streets. The goal is to keep vehicles that travel between Champaign and Urbana from going right through the campus area. That's the pedestrian area. We want them to go around the fringe, to use University, to use Florida or St. Mary's, and then to use Lincoln and Neal on the east and west sides. The philosophical approach was to balance interests. There are a lot of parties involved in this. City of Urbana, City of Champaign, MTD, the U of I, Campus Town 2000, CUATS. Not everyone was going to get everything they wanted. There was a limited space, intense activity, multiple modes, and many conflicts. So we had to balance the interests of everyone in developing this. And we needed to establish a transportation zone to prioritize modes and locations. And that's identified in this map. We have 3 zones. Zone 1 in the center includes the quad, and this is a very pedestrian-heavy zone where pedestrians are clearly the priority, and all design considerations should seek to emphasize pedestrian safety. Zone 2 is kind of a balance between Zone 3 and Zone 1. Zone 3 is vehicles only. We want vehicles to go around Zone 1, and so Zone 2 is an introduction of traffic calmings, measures that indicate to vehicles, you're coming to an area that has a lot of pedestrians, we would prefer that you went around this area. So let's get into some of the individual plans that were come up with on this study, and you have the exhibit document. We'll take a look at these exhibits, but I apologize because they're kind of hard to read on this screen. You can download them, I believe, from the CUATS website and get a much larger printout and look at these in much closer detail. The first sheet is Green Street, a lot of what you've already seen. Of course, Green Street was narrowed down to 3 lanes from 4th Street to Wright Street several years ago. Just this year, it was resurfaced and painted to 3 lanes from Green Street, or from 4th Street on west to Neal Street. The next sheet indicates what is proposed for Green Street east of Wright Street. And there are just a couple changes. We're keeping the physical roadway in place. We will only have 1 traffic lane in each direction. Right now you currently have 2. The plan is between Goodwin and Wright Street to have the outside lane in each direction operate as a transit only, a bus lane, because there is a lot of transit that operates between Goodwin and Wright Street. Some physical changes that we are proposing involves the Union entrance. Both of these entrances, there's a heavy pedestrian crossing that occurs there. Existing right now, you have left turn lanes for Burrell Avenue and Kings Highway. Well, those don't exist anymore, so there's no need to have those left turn lanes in the eastbound direction. So what we're proposing is to develop a raised median. This provides better protection for pedestrians crossing and a clearer delineation of exactly where the pedestrians are to cross. When we can concentrate the pedestrians, it's better information for motorists traveling along Green Street to know where exactly to be looking. A second physical change similar to this is to have a single pedestrian crossing immediately east of Loomis Lab. Right now, from that point all the way to Lincoln, there are many pedestrians crossing in many different locations. Again, we want to concentrate them down to 1 point, and that helps the motorists know that this is primarily where pedestrians will cross. To assist in this, we propose a vegetative barrier from this point, this crossing point, on east to Lincoln Avenue. This will probably result in removing left turn onto Gregory right in front of Hendricks. We would want to continue that median, so there is no access break. The reason being, when we propose a vegetative median, or vegetative barrier in the median, it causes sight distance problems with people trying to turn. They can't see vehicles, and we don't want to introduce a problem, so we would eliminate that left turn. Are vegetative barriers foolproof? No. There used to be one on Green Street near the Union, but they do prevent many people from crossing, and the more we can concentrate them in one location, the better. Matthews Avenue, we are proposing using the existing cross-section from barrier curb to barrier curb, edge of pavement to edge of pavement, and simply restriping it with diagonal parking similar to what you see on Green Street now. The reason for this is right now you have parallel parking on both sides. You have buses, you have pedestrians, you have bikes, you have people shooting in and out, bikes shooting in and out from many different directions. If we can get the parking on one side, it eliminates half the problem in trying to see pedestrians crossing. It also eliminates buses from stopping in the middle of the street on both sides of parking to drop off or pick someone off. They clearly drive up to the edge of pavement. Unfortunately, in proposing the diagonal striping, the diagonal parking as we have here, we would lose about 10 to 15 parking spots along Matthews, and that's high priority parking. It is always filled up. So what we would propose is also introducing diagonal parking on Oregon and Nevada, and we would probably be able to add overall parking if we were to do that. Goodwin Avenue, we propose making an improvement from the crossing south of Oregon. On North, we would propose a 6-foot striped median down the center, a single lane in each direction, and parallel parking. We propose a 6-foot median in lieu of a 4-foot median, which you have at some locations in campus, because 6 foot has been shown to provide enough width to protect a bicycle or someone with a stroller. It provides a little greater element of safety. We're also proposing a 3-way stop-controlled intersection at Illinois and Goodwin. This is a very, very heavy pedestrian crossing. If we can stop control it in all directions, pull the radius out, we'll discuss that idea just right after this, and shorten the pedestrian crosswalk area. Pedestrians are exposed to vehicles for a shorter period of time, and we're proposing doing this at several locations throughout campus. On the north side of Green Street also, we're proposing the 6-foot median for Goodwin with parallel parking on both sides and a single lane in each direction. Wright Street technically is in the city of Champaign. It's the east limit, which is the city boundary between Champaign and Urbana. But we think it's important to present something that is being proposed that's not there now. We would maintain the transit lane south of Green Street similar to what's there now, but we would remove the median protection between the bike lane and the transit. The reason for this is those bike lanes are currently 3 foot in width, and that's very substandard. They should be 5 foot in width if they were to meet bike standards. If we can eliminate that median, we can narrow the median and have 10-foot bike or a 10-foot bike lane, 5 foot in each direction. Additionally, during snowy weather, it makes it much easier to plow, because currently you have to have 2 plowing operations, your regular city plow and then a smaller plow for the bike lane. And even though it's snowing, there's still a lot of bicyclists who use the bike lane. We're also proposing continuing the bike lane north of Green onto Springfield Avenue. This stretch doesn't currently exist, but it would provide a continuum of the bike lane north and south between these two termini. Lincoln Avenue, we are proposing from Pennsylvania to Nevada, narrowing it to 3 lanes. Now, earlier I mentioned how Lincoln Avenue is the periphery, and we're trying to get vehicles to use the periphery instead of driving through campus. But this area is unique in that there is a lot of student housing east of Lincoln Avenue, and contrary to all the other periphery streets, we have a lot of pedestrians crossing Lincoln Avenue at this location. Similar to what was done on Green Street, when we narrow the street, it's a shorter crossing distance for pedestrian, and again, the shorter distance that a pedestrian is exposed to vehicles, the less likelihood there is for accidents. Under this scenario, Pennsylvania and Nevada will be signalized. We've run capacity analysis, and the capacity analysis indicates that this route under 3 lanes with the signalized intersections should operate better than it currently does now with stop signs at Pennsylvania and Nevada. It's 1 lane in each direction with a bidirectional left turn lane down the center. This drawing proposes raised medians at a couple crossing points. However, that's still being debated. Because typically emergency vehicles like to use that center lane. Vehicles get out of the way and they have easy access down the center. When you put in a raised median, however, that causes problems because they can't get over that raised median. So those are the exhibits right now. I want to briefly go over some of the improvements that are being proposed in detail and some that you have already seen. Sidewalk widening and mid-block crossings. The best example of this is what you see on Green Street and 6th Street that has recently been built. By narrowing the pavement, we are able to widen the sidewalk. This allows for more pedestrian utilization area. And another component of the entire project is to make the campus area look better. And when we have wider sidewalks, it gives us opportunity to plant trees, to have amenities, benches, planters, etc., throughout the entire campus area where this is being done. The mid-block crossing, the best example would be 6th Street between Green and John. University students are going to cross in mid-block no matter what. You simply can't stop that. So if we provide a mid-block crossing, it shortens their exposure to vehicles by narrowing the pavement in which they have to cross. It also widens the sidewalk area and again gives us opportunity to beautify the area with plantings, planters, benches, etc. Here's an example of where this has occurred. The upper picture we're looking at, we're on 6th Street looking west, and then the other is looking to the east, a little farther west. But we've greatly added improvements in terms of greenery, in terms of pedestrian lighting and safety. It looks a lot nicer. The benefits are widened sidewalks, unobstructed PED hallway. The PED hallway is the area where pedestrians actually walk. Improved PED lighting level for safety, minimized pavement for pedestrians to cross in the mid-block, and there's pedestrian amenities with streetscapes. I mentioned earlier the intersection neck downs where we pull out the radii, again, the radiuses of the intersections. Again, this minimizes the crossing distance of the intersection. The shorter distance a PED has to cross, the safer they are. This is the 6th and John intersection as it was earlier and as it looks today, and I personally think this is one of the most attractive intersections in the entire campus, and I'd like to see more intersections like it. The benefits, we have pedestrian countdown signals at all these intersections. It increases a feeling of safety. You're no longer guessing the walk, don't walk. You see a number and you know how many seconds you have to cross. It's understood by all age group. It reduces the number of stranded pedestrians in the crosswalk. They know how much time they have to cross. It's appropriate for area with large pedestrian volumes. If you don't have many pedestrian volumes, the countdown signals aren't always necessary. And it raises the comfort level when crossing. Yes?
And will these signals also have sound activation for the deaf?
Yes, and we get into that in the next slide, in fact. The accessible pedestrian signals make provisions for the safety of blind and visually impaired pedestrian needs. What it is, it's the clicking sound you hear for pedestrians to cross that are visually impaired, and there is a large contingent of visually impaired students here. In fact, the earlier project, the John Street project, where the 6th and John intersection was raised, we had some of these students come and comment on it, and from there we drew conclusions as to what to do in the future. An example is this picture up here. This is the Wright Street looking to the west as it was before the improvement. Here's the pedestrian crosswalk, and here's a visually impaired student. Well, he comes down this pedestrian hallway, and he thinks he crosses right there because that's typically the way these should be designed, or that's how they would like these to be designed. As we have in the lower picture, you'll see the building walls right here align with the PED crosswalk, so the visually impaired have an idea as to exactly where they need to cross. When you add the pedestrian signals making noise, they have an even greater cue as to where they should be crossing. So ideally, that's the way we want to design all these intersections. Now, sometimes it's physically impossible if you've got a skewed intersection, but that's the goal of what we're trying to do at every one of these. In addition, for some of the busy intersections, we've added the all-PED phase. What that is, it's all directions receive a red ball, the vehicles can't move, and there's one phase where pedestrians can cross at any location. They can even cross diagonally if they want. These make the intersections more PED-friendly. It raises the comfort level when they're crossing, and improves successful crossing in an allocated time, and it doesn't cost anything to just change the phasing. The benefit is accessible pedestrian signals permit users to cross with increased safety and security at busy intersections. It meets American with Disability Act enhancement standards, and the commendations have been received by the Illinois Council of the Blind. They helped us with this after the first project and said, this works and this doesn't work. Do this in the future. We have the illuminated crosswalks. We have one of those on Springfield Avenue east of Wright Street, and the jury's kind of still out on this issue. It is providing safety. It's easily seen at night, during rain, during fog. There's an argument that pedestrians don't even consider cars and they just cross right through this area without even thinking twice. There are some delays that are caused with vehicles, so this is still under study at this location right there. The benefits are there have been lower, as I understand, there are fewer traffic accidents at Matthews and Springfields where pedestrians were crossing prior to this. Now they have a clearly identified pedestrian crossing. They go there. In-street pedestrian signs, the yield to pedestrian signs that we put in the center of the street. These were first incorporated at the intersection of Goodwin and Illinois, I believe, and they were surprisingly successful. They're very low cost, easily maintainable and replaceable, and it does slow down vehicles. Since this time, they've been put at numerous locations throughout the city. What's the next steps in the CAT study? Public education process and raise awareness. We've coordinated with the university to every year we have a quarter of the students leave and a quarter of students come, and they're all new and they've never seen this before. So there's clearly an orientation process in which we're coordinating with the U of I to let them know what's trying to be accomplished through the CAT study. There needs to be enforcement of any violations and data collection. Some of these ideas are experimental. As I said, we're not sold on the lighted pedestrian crossing. In our first study, we found out some information from the visually impaired that we took into consideration when we continued to design. We have seen a reduction in volume on Green Street, but we're trying to track where all the volume's going. Some of it's going on Springfield Avenue. Where else is it going? And we need to plan for future physical improvements. As mentioned before, these are just broad brush concepts that the Technical Advisory Committee concluded is where we want to go with this, but these are not final plans. That's the next step of the process. And that's the CATS process in a nutshell today.
A couple other comments. I put in the memo, and you saw in the summary, a listing of projects that would be in Urbana. I think it's important to understand a couple things. Number one is that we wanted to have just an order of magnitude of cost if there were to be curb and gutter changes, street width changes, neck downs, these sorts of things. But we don't have any specific funding source identified for these projects, and they would need to compete with other capital improvement projects to keep that in mind. Meanwhile, one thing that we do, if we do make changes, we want to look at what I would call low-cost type changes, and which would be more in the order of signage and striping. We have done that, as Jerry mentioned already, and we would continue to look for those types of things rather than moving curbs and gutters and such first. We want to look at low-cost type solutions. The university is also desirous to see and pursue low-cost type solutions or work we can get the biggest bang for the buck and try and improve safety. I know, for example, they'd like to work with the city and look at creating those medians across from the Illini Union, for example, where those left turn lanes are no longer necessary for eastbound and northbound turning movements. And for perhaps $25,000 or so, look at creating large concrete raised medians that would help with those crossings at Burrell and Kings Highway. So those are our thought process here. Again, to get into the details of Lincoln Avenue and to talk about accident rates and those sorts of things, I would say for another meeting, not for tonight. But we would like to pursue that discussion in a separate forum, because there is a timeline for Lincoln Avenue. I think there is an opportunity, for example, to look at a 3-lane if we want to pursue that situation, as we do have monies in the capital improvement plan to do the traffic signals. We do have some state money to help with the one intersection, at Pennsylvania and Lincoln. And we also have University of Illinois cost participation in signalizing those two intersections too. We do have programmed to remove the series rusted old street light poles on those streets and remove those all and put new street lighting in and better lighting in along that stretch of street. And lastly, we do have monies to do street resurfacing work in that area because the pavement is in pretty bad condition. So those are thoughts for more details in another meeting to be soon. But we're here to answer any questions.
Okay. We'll do our council questions first, and then we'll get the two people who've come to speak on this issue from the audience, because then the chair will be vacant. So, okay, for council, questions?
A couple of things. One is, I think Green Street is beautiful, and I commend the work that you did there. Also, 6th and John is my favorite intersection in probably Champaign-Urbana completely. The whole community, I think it's a beautiful intersection. When I first arrived there, I thought, if only we could take this to our downtown, and actually, I'd like to see Kuwats help us with our downtown in the future, because we still have, I think, a long way to go. Although we did do some beautiful streetscape work in downtown, we still have some pedestrian safety issues. So the couple of questions. One is, where's the complete Phase 2 document? How can I read it? I assume this is an executive summary.
Right. Actually, I have CD-ROMs. I think it's on the Kuwats website also, the Kuwats website.
Could we get CD-ROMs of it?
Yeah.
Okay, that'd be great. It'd probably be the easiest thing instead of wasting paper. The second thing is, I like a lot of the plan, especially the pedestrian crossings across Lincoln Avenue. One thing that seems to be missing is the Green Street Lincoln Avenue connection. Especially, I am constantly walking and biking in that area, and the volume of students who live north of Green Street is actually greater than the areas that you focused on, the Nevada Street and the Pennsylvania. Yes, it's true that we have some dense housing in that area, but if you look at the MOR district and the number of students who live in the district in the MOR district, it's actually quite a few more. And so you'll actually see more students crossing at Springfield Avenue and at Green Street than you will in the Pennsylvania Avenue area. So the question is, when I look at these maps, there's a missing component here. What's going to happen at Green Street and Lincoln Avenue? Currently, it's quite a bit, for a pedestrian, it's quite formidable to get to that intersection. There's not a sense of protection at all at that intersection. I would say similar things about the Springfield-Lincoln Avenue connection. So what are the plans in terms of looking at those areas, especially since they are within this study area?
Well, my immediate reaction is that the traffic volumes, the turning movements at those intersections really dictate 5-lane cross-section through there, where you need those turn lanes. You need that pavement width for 2 northbound, 2 southbound, and left turn lanes. So I think there'd be significant delays or level of service degradation if we were to look at something less than the 5 lanes that are there. As far as the amount of time to cross the street, as far as I know, we have ample walk time to cross the street. I've not had complaints on that or received those, at least recently, that there's a problem with that. I think that Green and Springfield, those 2 streets crossing Lincoln, those are going to be a wide roadway to cross, and there are, the signals could be upgraded at some point, and that's a kind of a long-term plan to have countdown signals there. That is definitely all signalized intersections on campus over a period of time, and when I say that, I'm saying probably at least 5 years we would like to convert those PED heads to the updated, countdown signals with the walk person, don't walk LED signal heads there. So that's in the works. But I think as far as The neck-down type idea that you saw in the heart of campus in the University District, I would find it pretty difficult to do at a Green or at a Springfield.
Okay. Then my last comment actually is that in looking at the I think pedestrians are taken care of in this document, at least from reading the executive summary. I haven't looked at the whole document. The missing piece is I feel like bikes have actually been shortchanged in this document. They receive very little consideration, and actually there's an opportunity that's just kind of staring us in the face that isn't, if you look at the bike page, which is page 18, receives a single page. There's only 2 streets that are commented on. That's Wright Street and Matthews Avenue. But the opportunity that I think is staring us in the face is if we go down to 3 lanes on Lincoln Avenue, which I strongly support. I think that's the right direction. Then we have 3.5 feet on either side if we don't want to do the curbage, which of course is extremely expensive, to put 2 bike lanes, one going each direction. And I used to represent the constituents at FARPR. I believe Brandon is now the representative of those constituents. But I know from talking to folks there, and I also know from driving and biking along that area, that there are students, many of whom do not own cars because they're freshmen, they live in FARPR, who bike along Lincoln Avenue or try to bike along the sidewalk, which is quite difficult and actually dangerous given all the traffic coming out of the Allen Hall, Lincoln residence halls. So if they're on the sidewalk, they're a danger to pedestrians, and there's no room on the street at all. And I've seen students, especially because the buses are going in that direction, say they're headed south on Lincoln Avenue, basically, trying to confine their bicycle motion to about a foot with buses going by. So there's a significant, there's definitely bikes on that route. There's definitely not a easy way to get because of the log cabin home and the oaks in that area. There's not actually an easy bike route through campus to get to FARPR. So students do bike on Lincoln Avenue, and there's no provision for them. And here we have an opportunity for 3.5-foot provision for them with no additional cost to the city at all, but it's not in this plan, and I want to understand why.
Well, actually, the 3.5, 4-foot shoulder would be a little wider shoulder. Actually, in Nevada, the pavement's a little wider up there. Mm-hmm. It could be, and certainly could be used, that shoulder, for a bike lane, if you will. The problem is it's not wide enough to technically sign it as a bike lane. Okay?
Well, how wide does it need to be?
I think
5 feet.
I think 5 feet is the dimension. And we are looking into removing and widening the street to get 5 feet. But it doesn't preclude the fact that someone could ride a bike in that 3.5, 4 foot. And again, it gets a little wider toward the north end. So, but we would technically not.
But isn't it the case that there's bike lanes on campus, which you just said are a certain width? I thought you said that they were 3 feet or...
The existing bike
they're
lanes
actually marked
are
as
3.5 feet. Yes, but they're existing features. If we are to make an improvement, they have to meet current standards.
Okay, so the...
But your comment on Lincoln Avenue also pertains to the recent Green Street restriping from 4th to Neal. Those what happened is when those were narrowed down to 3 lanes, the outside stripe was brought in, not so much for a bike lane, but if we didn't have the stripe, then there'd be 15-foot lanes in each direction, and the wider your lane is, the faster vehicles will travel, and that's clearly not one of the goals of this study. But a secondary benefit of that is that bikers have seen this as a lane for them to travel on.
Yes, that's me.
On the outside.
I've been biking on those lanes.
Yeah, we're not calling it a bike lane because it's not 5 feet in width. If we called it a bike lane, we'd have to make it 5 feet. We'd have to widen the pavement. So the students are figuring it out, and they're taking advantage of it.
Is it just on that topic, is it possible for us to take a foot off of the lanes, the traffic lanes on either side, or I guess 1.5 foot? I mean, is it possible to go down? We have 11-foot, I believe, lanes there, and is that the minimum that we can have?
Yes, when you look at the bus traffic and truck traffic and larger vehicles, to go less than that, I would be very concerned. I mean, 12-foot is a kind of a standard guideline width, but 11-foot is acceptable in this area, and to go from 11 to 10, I think we would be potentially inducing some other problems operationally. So, but it's a good comment, but I think going 11 and 10-foot center lane and 11-foot would be the north and southbound lane is the prudent thing to do.
Okay.
Charlie?
Yeah, actually, Danielle has stolen some of my thunder here. I'm not quite as complimentary on some of the stuff as she is. Yes, it really does a lot for pedestrians, and for the inner part of campus, that's probably extremely important. Some of the design, though, as somebody whose primary way of getting around is also on a bicycle, I find some problems in a couple of places. One is if I'm going westbound on Green Street, I'm on the University bike path on the north side of the road. I want to, get to Neal and Green, for example. I've got 2 blocks where I'm forced out onto the street, fairly narrow now because the sidewalks were made so wide. Yeah, the sidewalks look great, real nice and wide, but if they'd been 2 feet shorter or narrower on either side, you'd get the same spacing that you get from 4th and Green to Neal Street. In other words, if a little bit more thought had been put into that, we'd have a straight shot for bikes all the way across campus, which would have been really nice. Right now, I've got a 2-block area where when I'm on there, I have to be really careful, and I can't get up on the sidewalk. And frankly, it looks like there's plenty of space on the sidewalk for bicyclists, and maybe that's something to consider in the design there. So a concern that I have in anywhere where you do, I wrote this down here, anywhere where you do the sidewalk widening, I think you need to take into account and keep in mind that there are bicyclists on the road that you might be squeezing out. Yes, you're dealing with the pedestrians, but you're forgetting about those of us on bikes. The same goes for your radii pullouts. If you bring those curbs out too far, again, you force bicycles right into the vehicle traffic. So I'm coming down the road on Goodwin, for example, which is a very common path I take. I'm south or northbound on Goodwin, and I hit one of those curves. All of a sudden I'm forced into the cars, where if you leave a couple of feet, yeah, it's a compromise for the pedestrians, but it leaves me space as a bicyclist to get through there and stay to the side of the vehicle instead of having to get in front or squeezing in behind or squeezing next to. And when there are buses involved, it's even more important. So with respect to bicycles, I think this study really falls flat all over the place because it doesn't address the campus bike paths, which really need to be connected up with city bike paths everywhere. We really have to think about, okay, so there's a bike path that ends at in front of the PAR, FAR dorms there, and it curves around to the west there. Why should it stop? Why should it curve off to the west? Why can't it continue on northward on Lincoln? As Danielle said, striping it to 3 lanes, one of the advantages there is that you'll create the same thing that you've created on Green Street between 4th and Neal, and that will be a very good thing for bicyclists. It'll also, the only problem there that I see is buses coming through there. They're going to pull off to the right, but maybe that's okay because they pull off to the right in designated spots. If those are cross-hatched and marked, so the bicyclists coming ahead know that they're moving into an area that's sort of designated for buses. They can be on the lookout for buses pulling in on them and so on. It's not a big deal if a bus pulls in front of me if I've got some warning. My concern is that none of this study has really taken into account bicyclists. Now, the facetious question I have is anybody on the staff that's done the engineering work here, is there any engineer that's actually a bicyclist and has gone out there and bicycled these routes? Because that's what I think really needs to be done as part of this. And if you need any help, just let me know. I'll go with you.
City employees with bikes in addition to cars?
Maybe.
Any other points?
Yeah, there are a couple more things. Now, with respect to the pedestrian crossing lights, there are 2 pedestrian crossings marked on Lincoln, and I'm a little concerned about where they're located. They seem to be located more towards the south rather than being equidistant between the two new lights. It strikes me that if you're going to do two crossings, they should be equidistant between the lights, or maybe there should just be one dead center between the two lights. So I don't know what needs to be discussed there. If it were to be my concern with putting up a crosswalk and requiring people to stop there would be that there are so many pedestrians there that I could foresee a situation where cars wouldn't be able to move for long periods of time. And I'm seeing that whenever I travel on Springfield. In fact, I now avoid Springfield as much as I possibly can because of getting stuck at the pedestrian crossing. There are particularly times when it's worse than others, after, especially at the class breaks and at lunchtime.
I'm thinking that since this document is presented to us in broad strokes, and there'll probably be a lot of more defined fine-tuning, I wonder if we could kind of move along a little bit.
Those are my 3 points, Robert. I'm done.
Oh.
Okay, except that
You actually got them, okay.
Yeah, those are the 3 points. I'm just concerned about what's going to happen now. One last thing that I would want to point out is that on your map of Lincoln, you create right turn only lanes or left turn only lanes when it narrows from 4 to 3, except in one place, which really puzzled me, which is why you didn't do it at the corner of Nevada and Lincoln, where you forced traffic down to one lane rather than having a right turn only lane to go westbound on Nevada.
Actually, that's something that, as we're looking at the design, we're looking at making it a right turn only also.
Okay.
So-
Yeah, I figured it was something like that, because that makes much more sense. Okay, now, what I would propose doing is that as some design features, some of these questions come up, and I know there are going to be a lot of other questions here, I've got a pile of email from constituents that came to Brandon and I, was posted on the WUNA list. There are a dozen to 15 comments here with various questions. Rather than go through them all right now, I'll let Brandon's questions sort of summarize them. I'll give these to the clerk to be entered in. Several of the people who are on here also in the audience and will be speaking. So I'll cut these off by just submitting them.
Yes, and it does sound to me like a good idea that people might submit to the study and to Bill Gray's office specific proposed ideas or improvements as the process goes on. And Brandon?
Yeah, I wanted to say that I feel like this is a big improvement, and many, many neighbors are very supportive of making this area more pedestrian-friendly and safer for everyone, and of the stoplights and getting more cars through. I have a few questions while we have Jerry here and can talk to the experts. One of them is just an issue that was raised about the buses and the way they stop and pass cars. When MTD buses stop in this stretch, when they stop in a lane, will we encourage traffic to use the middle lane and go around, or encourage them to just stop and wait behind the bus, and how do we take that into account and make it safe?
Again, this gets into a little bit of a design detail, but we've been in discussion with MTD, and we would look to minimize the stops in that area. In other words, if you're northbound, to try to have the stop south of Pennsylvania and the second stop, for example, north of Nevada, for example, we would look at trying to have virtually no stops in between, or have maximum one stop in that stretch of time, which is a little bit different than kind of the at will, you flag them down, they stop. So there'd be some education involved with that type of thing. Secondly, technically you cannot pass a bus in a 3-lane cross-section. When you have that solid yellow line, rules of the road say you should not pass. Do vehicles do it? Have I seen it elsewhere in town? I have. Do we strictly enforce it, Chief? I don't know that we do. But technically you're not supposed to pass. But the good news is, for the 4 routes that go up and down Lincoln in this area, 3 of them are, I'll call, short-lived. They kind of come up Pennsylvania, North Lincoln, and over to Nevada or whatever. They're kind of zigzagging around campus and such. One of them is more of a north-south, up and down Lincoln Avenue. But of course, when you get into the 4-lane, 5-lane cross-section, it's not as much of an issue. So, yes, there are buses, there's bus routes, 4 of them through this area, heavily used during the daytime. But again, we're wanting to see what we can do to minimize the number of stops in this, at least, stretch between Nevada and Pennsylvania, so that, the delays won't be quite as bad.
A second consideration I was wondering if we took into account was traffic being diverted onto Busey or Orchard or other roads. I heard a lot of comments about, whether this street and lights would make people want to use other streets, and I wonder if we think that'll happen more or less.
With signalizing these 2 intersections, there would be less delay during the PM and AM peak hour. Less delay, I don't see the benefit unless technically your destination is those areas. I don't know why, from a through traffic standpoint, anybody would do that. And if you've ever driven down Busey, and I think most of us have, it's a stop sign every block. I can guarantee you, even today, I don't think you'd be making more time. So
Yes, you do.
my answer is probably no.
Okay.
With the signalized intersections, you'd be quicker to use Lincoln.
One last thing is I definitely agree with Danielle about the bike lane thing. I think lots of neighbors are interested in considering, well, it's not a bike lane, it's just a striped area, but bicyclists could use it. I think a lot of neighbors are interested in that. And definitely a neighborhood meeting this fall to talk about the details would be appreciated. I know lots of the people who live near Lincoln are really interested in what will happen there and when the lights will come and when things will be under construction. And I'm sure if we announce it and could schedule a time this fall for it to be at the church there on Lincoln or somewhere, that people would be very interested in coming out and we'd get some good feedback. Thanks.
Yep.
Okay. Anybody else? We do have a couple of people from the audience who'd like to speak about this and who've left their slips. So thank you very much for the presentation. We'll make the table available to our audience participation. And if Georgia Morgan would like to speak at this time concerning the traffic plan on Lincoln. And please give us your name and your address.
I live at 804 West Nevada. My main concern is what this plan is going to do for those of us that have it in our heads to turn south off of Nevada Street, turn south onto Lincoln. That used to be something that wasn't that hard to do, as Hiram mentioned. Used to be you couldn't do it at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Well, there's a lot of times now that it's just impossible to turn left off of Nevada. So, yeah, I go down Busey to Pennsylvania where I can get onto Lincoln, where there's a stop. But now they can put a stop sign at Lincoln, but not for me. The other concern I have, and this is just a question that comes to my mind, if they put in ticking stoplights, how far away do you hear that ticking? I would like to know the answer to that, and that's something maybe they can tell us next time they talk to us.
Okay, thank you very much for your input. We appreciate it. Another person who would like to speak about the study is Gary Zitko. Zitko, welcome, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Most of my concerns are from a bicycle perspective, and they've already been mentioned by various council members. So I'll just add a couple of things to that. One is that I understand on Lincoln Avenue, the existing lane width is 10 feet. Is that correct? And so you could have two 10-feet through lanes and an 11-foot turn lane and have 4.5 feet on each side for bicycles. That wouldn't be reducing anything. So there's a little bit more room there, perhaps, than recognized. In terms of the signage, there are places in Tucson, that's another story, but they have signs up, share the road. I mean, can't you put a less than 5-foot lane and say share the road and have bicycles there, and you can share roads with bicycles any place. So I don't see why you need to have an officially designated bike lane at 5 feet. So I would like to propose, I guess this is details, but you could put 4.5 feet on each side, and that's the width of the bike lane in green between Neal and 4th. They're 4.5 feet wide, which is about the minimum that you would want. If that's put in at Lincoln, I think that will be the only striped bike lanes in the city of Urbana, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, there are recreational paths down Race Street and along Windsor, but there are no striped bike lanes in the entire city. And when I go to Tucson and I see what they have, or even Madison or Chicago, we are really way, way behind. So I hope that the Lincoln Avenue will give us a chance to put those stripes in there, hopefully like 4.5 feet, and maybe that will be a little virus that will spread to the rest of Urbana and Champaign. Thank you.
Thank you also very much. Okay, that ends, I believe, is there any other public input on this topic at this point? Okay, I don't believe there is. Since that was merely a presentation, there's really not any particular business that we need to address at this point, and if there's...
If I could make, Dennis, if I could make one last comment then.
Okay, go ahead.
I really, as much as I support all of this and the work that's been done, I think, just to reiterate, I think bicycles really have been left out in a lot of it. In fact, as you read through the executive summary, the study basically says, that they haven't really addressed bicycles, that they need to be addressed separately, but I think that really misses the point. This is supposed to address the 4 modes of transportation. It's a perfect opportunity to deal with bicycles. I think bicycles need to be dealt with. They don't need their own study. I think the 2 issues have to be considered simultaneously, or the 3 issues. You've got pedestrians, bikes, and cars and buses as the third one. You can't really, I think that's part of the problem with what we have going on in town, is that the bicycles are third or fourth rate, and you've got a mishmash of bike paths that don't connect up right. They don't, they end in no place, and they put you in the middle of traffic or something like that. One of the most glaring ones right now is the new one-way direction on Gregory Street in front of the new Gregory building between Nevada and Oregon. It's become one-way south. There is a bike path that comes out of the Cersei complex, Allen Hall, all the dorms that are to the south of that. You have a bike path that ends right there, and you're looking at one-way traffic coming at you. And, of course, it's a big, wide street. There's no bicycle lane marked or anything, but, if you're headed for ISR or for the North Campus, boom, you go straight across that, and then you're running against traffic. That's the kind of lack of thinking that I see with respect to bicycles in the community, and really needs to be addressed, and I think it belongs in this study. So I just wanted to get that last comment in. Thank you.
Okay, and as a clarification, Jerry, is this considered your final report?
That's the executive summary. There is a report, a larger report, of which that is an abbreviated version of, and that's available for download at KUOT's website.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, Bill?
So I'll provide CD-ROMs for all council members for the full report. I apologize. I was respectful of your time and thought the executive summary would do, but I'll provide the full report, and that'd be fine. And do we want to reschedule this for a subsequent committee meeting for further discussion on adoption? That's ultimately our goal here, and our comprehensive plan, of course, references the CATS study too. So we want to try to be in harmony with what the comp plan has. And
it would seem probably appropriate, because there was quite a lot of emails that some of the constituents have contacted with input that might be useful before making a final
what we'll do is we'll prepare the questions provided with answers at a subsequent meeting then.
Yes, and Danielle.
Just there are a couple of suggestions I heard that one is to have a conversation with the community about maybe narrowing it down to Lincoln Avenue and the maps about Lincoln Avenue and folks being able to cross, and to actually invite the neighborhood and have a conversation that maybe is prior to our conversation where we adopt something.
Oh.
The second, and just based on the amount of communication we've seen and the questions, because folks didn't know where to access this information or haven't necessarily looked at it, is to give them that opportunity to look at the maps, have a conversation, tea and cookies, and have a conversation about it. And it doesn't necessarily need to be around a council meeting. Sure. So then the second thing is, it's unclear to me what happens with our input today. We've said some things, we like some things, there's other things we don't like, bikes haven't been addressed. Is it the case that the Phase 2 plan that we'll get a CD-ROM of won't change between this conversation and the conversation where we adopt things, because at this point, I'm uncomfortable adopting a plan that just doesn't deal with bicycles on a level that I think we should. So I'm giving you a heads up that I like a lot of the plan, but I just don't feel like we should adopt it as is.
What we have done in the past in these situations is that we've taken the public input, council input, listed those questions, came up with answers, and the adoption then included not only a report, but an addenda, if you will, of all the comments to that. So whatever those comments are about the bike plan or the lack of bike needs and issues that weren't addressed, whatever, that's part of it. And then at some point, council adopts then the plan and all the comments attached to it.
Okay. That's helpful.
That's how we've done it in the past.
Right. Bill, while you're sitting there, who was responsible for that, making that one-way section there in front of the New Gregory Apartments? Is that us, or is that the university?
No,
the university controls that?
Yes. Yeah.
So we'll be seeing further, we'll have an opportunity, and the citizens will have an opportunity to do some more inputting before we actually come back, I guess, at another committee meeting to review once more the improvements and potential then adopt it at a future date.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay. Very thorough. Well, we have a couple more items to go, and let's go to it. Item number 11, a Champaign County Visioning Project presentation. We've had a lot of visions coming to our door this afternoon, this evening. And I don't recognize you. Please introduce yourself.
Yes. My name is Frank DeNovo. I'm the Director of Planning and Community Development for the Regional Planning Commission and the project manager for Big Small Owl, Champaign County. Given the hour, I'm going to go through an abbreviated version as much as I can. This is actually not my PowerPoint presentation, so I'm going to.
So you can run ragged on it.
Okay. But Big Small Owl is the name that we've given to this effort. It's both an organization and a project. And the fact that it's also the name of an organization is very important. The purpose of this is to develop a county-wide vision for the future, looking out 25 or 30 years, that identifies our common goals and values and ambitions, and provides a foundation on which we can act. The purpose of it really is ultimately in that action. And you can read this in your packet. I think there are three really important things about it. One, it's not a government initiative. It's a community initiative. And it's being run by an independent, nonprofit, albeit unincorporated organization. It is going to succeed to the extent that all of the voices in the community are heard in this effort. Inclusivity is central to the whole purpose of the exercise, and it's ultimately action-oriented in its result. And although we use the process of developing a vision as a method of motivating and focusing discussions, what we're really after is a follow-on set of action plans that are intended to lead to concrete results. Big Small Owl, this whole process came out of a variety of sources of people discussing the need for more cooperative, comprehensive thinking among all of the various parties in the community. And this came out of the Metropolitan Intergovernmental Council, the Economic Development Corporation, the county's Blue Ribbon Panel on the Environment, all came to sort of similar desires for a county-wide comprehensive look at the future. One of the reasons that we did not propose to do a comprehensive plan is that there really isn't any entity that's in a position to implement the comprehensive plan at a county level. the county government really is a special purpose unit of government. It does not have the same resources or authority or powers that municipal governments have. And so when you're looking at the county as an entity, you're looking at a multi-party regional effort. And if you were to bring all 180 taxing bodies in Champaign County to the table to jointly adopt a plan, it's an extraordinarily ambitious exercise. Even if you're only to bring, 30 of them to the table, 1/6, it would still be an extraordinarily ambitious exercise. But to bring the citizens, to bring the community together to talk outside of the context of a specific planning requirement, thank you, is a feasible and constructive process. Anyway, about a year ago, we pulled together, at the request of the county board, an effort. After talking to a variety of people around the community, we pulled together an ad hoc group of people that started talking about this and discussing the feasibility of it. And last spring, they constituted themselves as a steering committee for this effort, and we set about raising money to get the effort underway, and that's how Big Small Wall came into existence. There's nothing particularly magical about this group of people. Frankly, it was John Dimmitt and myself who identified the first group of people somewhat arbitrarily, and they identified others, and it kind of grew from there. The structure of Big Small Wall, Champaign County, is a little bit complicated, is this kind of an effort is likely to get. The core of it is really the steering committee. There's a steering committee. We're composed right now of about 36 people. They come from nonprofit organizations, business, as well as government. And they make the substantive decisions. That body right now is co-chaired by Bruce Knight, the City of Champaign Planning Director, and Jennifer Armstrong, the Executive Director of 40 North 88 West. They are doing the heavy lifting, not only in terms of making decisions about the substance and process that we're using, but they're also doing a lot of the work on a volunteer basis. It became clear shortly afterwards that the parties that were making significant contributions to this felt that they had to exercise a fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers, shareholders, contributors, whoever that funded their organizations. So the Sponsors Council was constructed in order to provide that mechanism. It also has an important role. These are the mayors, the county board chair, the chancellor, president of Carle Hospital. These are people that we can rely on being involved in the project when necessary to make phone calls to other people and have those calls received and have things happen. The Sponsors Council is chaired by Barb Oysaki, the county board chair, and Chancellor Herman serves as the vice chair of that body. Now, out of the steering committee, there's what we call a project coordination committee. That's a sort of staff level committee, although it involves a lot of other people beyond the planning staffs. Libby is on that committee, as well as Bruce Knight at Champaign, April Getchus from the university, Vicki Mays from the Park District sits down there, Tammy Lemke from United Way, Jennifer Armstrong, Preston Williams from the school district, Chris Silver, the head of the Department of Urban and Regional Planning at the university, and I'm sure I've forgotten someone. But this is a body that's a sounding board for me. They help me out. They carry a lot of the weight. They're doing a lot of the work. That's people that are actually, getting things done, organizing things, arranging things, and so on. Ultimately, all of this effort by all of these bodies leads to the recruitment and establishment of what we call the community assembly, or a group of stakeholders. And I'll explain in a minute what that group is. That's the body that really counts at the end of the day. They're the ones that will decide what the vision is and what the content of the action plans are. We're also working with some consultants. ACP Visioning and Planning from New York is the principal body that is principal consultant that has designed the process and will actually run this series of meetings. They have a tremendous amount of experience with this, probably more than anyone in the country. They conducted the granddaddy of all visioning projects in Chattanooga, Tennessee, 20-odd years ago, that led to the transformation of that city and its waterfront. And more recently, they were the facilitators of the planning efforts for the reconstruction of Ground Zero in New York. RPC is involved in this only for convenience sake and because we're a sort of logical place to put this countywide effort. We are the fiscal agent for Big Small All because it's not incorporated and it can't contract in its own right. And we're also, through myself, are providing staff support to the effort. We're also working, and if you've seen the buttons or any of the literature, the logo, and if you've been to the most excellent webpage, we're working with some very talented local graphic design, advertising, public relations firm from Champaign called Surface 51 as well. Now, there are a number of things that we've intentionally tried to make this effort different than anything we've done in the past. One of those things is to employ professionals in these fields of advertising and public relations. We are selling something. When we want professional help in selling something, and what we are selling is the idea that people need to participate. That's the product that we're using professional advertising assistants to sell. How this is all going to work, the slide's not really legible. I hope the ones that are in your packet are more legible. The first phase really was just the consultants coming here. We took them on a field trip around the county, and we've been organizing a series of interviews for them so that they can talk to people from a variety of backgrounds and positions in the community so that they develop a sense of the environment in which they're working and they can be more effective. The second phase of it is the one that really matters. That is a series of public meetings where this dialogue among all of the citizens in the community really happens. The first set of those are going to begin in November. They're called the public dialogue or community dialogue meetings. There will be 9 of them, starting on November 1st. The first one being one focused specifically at high school students as a sort of kickoff event for the public process. The second one will occur that evening on November 1st at Urbana Middle School. And Urbana Middle School was selected because we wanted to be sure that that meeting was very well attended, and everyone assured us that in Urbana that meeting would be very well attended. These meetings, and I'll describe a little bit more what happens to them, will be a little bit later.
Maybe you could summarize them a little bit so that because of the hour.
This is a meeting that will be used to generate ideas that will feed into the rest of the process. And it'll be followed on in January by what's called the Community Assembly meeting or a Stakeholders Workshop meeting, where those results, along with other exercises, will be used and people will begin to actually focus on developing the vision statement. Now, one of the key elements of that process, of that community assembly process, is that's a public meeting that's open to anyone that wants to attend, but at the core of it will be an invited group of people of perhaps as many as 300 who are selected by the steering committee to be representative of all of the different groups that there might be in the community, whether they're defined by interest, by, could be occupational, could be ideological, for example, whether it's a demographic group, race, age, gender, whatever, or geographically, city, country, small town. And the idea is to be carefully make sure that voices that don't normally get heard in this instance. So we don't want to just rely on the people that normally come to meetings. We want to be sure that people that don't come to meetings come to this meeting and are heard here. And so that body will actually work up the visioning statement and then define topical areas that need further work. or that need to be, or that they want to address to elaborate in these action plans. So they'll set up 6, 8 possible committees. We don't know what they'll be yet. We can probably guess, for example, there'll be one on the environment, very likely to be one on criminal justice issues, potentially education is a kind of an obvious sort of topic. But it will be up to that body to decide what it is that they want to work on. Those topical committees will then work through the spring to develop action plans for each of those subject areas that will be completed by May. And then that'll be wrapped up together in a report that'll be presented to the entire community again in a big public meeting called the Community Choices Workshop, where those action plans will be reviewed, ratified, and prioritized. That sort of brings to a degree of closure the public part of this. This will finally be refined, working with the steering committee into a final report. And while there will be a document that records what happens, I want to emphasize that the document is not what we're interested in. The document is not the object here. The key object is the actions that occur after that document is delivered. We really are focusing on not only developing an action plan as an agenda of activities to occur in the community, but to allow people that have similar concerns to come together in this process and coalesce as activated constituencies that will then go on and pursue the items that they care about on that action agenda with whoever they need to pursue them with. And again, I want to emphasize this is not a government project, so what comes out of it will not have the color of law. This is not an effort from which people can walk away and say, well, it's the city council's responsibility or it's the county board's job to see to it that this comes into being.
So you're saying it's a creative grassroots moment.
Right.
Okay.
And so the action agenda will focus on businesses, nonprofit groups, as well as government groups. And that's really what we're after in this process.
And so your presentation tonight to the council is to drum up some enthusiasm for this, to announce it to us, basically. I mean, I think the structure of it is pretty well covered in the handout that we received and how the process will work. So if you wanted to leave a message with the city council, what would it be?
Well, we're entering, in order to make this work, we need to have an extensive outreach campaign. While we're doing a publicity campaign in a variety of media, that is no substitute for one-on-one communication to reach out to all of the various groups and constituencies that need to be involved. So we would like as many people as possible to become outreach partners with us, and anyone that has access to a network that can be activated, that can, we've got text that can be dropped into newsletters or placed on websites. We have buttons, and I think Libby passed around the buttons.
Yes.
We would like everybody to be wearing these buttons for the next week or two. We would like your staff to be wearing the buttons for the next week or two. We want people to start asking what's with the buttons. And we want people to tell them, if nothing else, tell them bigsmallll.cc. Go to the webpage, find out what this is, find out how to be involved in it. And to emphasize to everyone that we need every voice heard in this process. So we really want people to keep that message in mind, not just wear a button, but be prepared to tell people what the button is for, what it's about. This will mesh with the billboard campaign that will launch in a week or so. So we want you to do things like that. Go to the website, find out what's there. If you're interested in doing some outreach, if you have see some opportunities where you can activate some of the networks that you're involved in, contact me. You can go to the website, and we've got a contact site there, or you can go email me directly at fdenovo@ccrpc.org. I think, no, my email's not on there, but either way, you can get to me or call me. We've got a little form that we'd like to send out, and I've got some materials. As you get started with outreach, we've got a whole package of stuff that we can provide to help with that. And I guess that's really what I wanted to say.
I appreciate it very much, and it's a very interesting program, very ambitious, especially for a non-incorporated private group of people in the community. Any other questions for Mr. Frank DeNovo?
Frank, just real quickly, clearly, a campaign aimed at web stuff is going to hit the computer literate and so on. How do you propose to reach those that don't have that technology, those that don't use that technology, maybe the more rural part of the community?
Well, this is why the outreach efforts are so important. I mean, we need to the extent that we can, find our way into newsletters, find our way into conversations, find personal conversations or meetings. We have a speakers bureau that's available to appear at service clubs or any other venue where someone might want a speaker. We will have the advertising campaign. Part of what we're employing Surface 51 to help us with is public relations, in the sense that, in the big sense, where they're arranging to get speakers on radio programs and so on, and place commentaries where we can in the media, various kinds. We're using every medium that we can, but I think the most important ones, the most important thing that we can do is the one-to-one communication, is to activate networks and get people just talking. And we can provide flyers, brochures, hard copy materials to distribute if necessary, but there's no way that we can reach out to everyone in a centralized fashion. This has to be a sort of ripple effect where we activate some people and they activate some people, and it's got to grow up that way. It's the only way we can reach 180,000 people.
Yes.
And just for the city staff part, we're looking at having some banners made for our downtown areas, and we'll have staff and steering committee members at a table at Farmers Market for at least two of the Saturdays in October. We're looking to, these flyers are posted in City Hall, and we'll be making a practice of bringing these to all our many meetings that we attend. And Matt Wempe has been working on this project as well in the project committee, and can provide blurbs over email for listservs, hard copy, posters, buttons, so we can coordinate with Frank in trying to get the word out within Urbana, and as well as the consultants helping throughout the county. So, big effort.
Danielle?
Just a suggestion. The low power radio station in San Diego had I think one of the best models for outreach to the community. What they did is they actually decided how to segment the community, all the different kinds of folks who are in the community, and had plans to reach out to each of them. And then if one of those plans didn't work, they tried again. So they kind of set themselves a very high bar to say, we're going to make sure we hear from X, Y, and Z. And I've seen a little bit of that in terms of you going to the high school and speaking to high school students. And I know that I really commend your efforts to reach out to every segment of the community, because a lot of times certain segments you really have to go to them. They're not going to come to you. So you might want to consider having that kind of segmenting it, and not giving up until you actually get information back from the particular segment. Your first try might not work, so try again.
We have went through the exercise where steering committee members sort of began to do that, identify different groups on these three dimensions: interests, demographics, and geography, and take responsibility for being the person that reached out to activate other people and get it all rolling in those areas. And we do have a spreadsheet where we've in lieu of a database, where we've identified all of these people and we can keep track of where the contacts have been made. One of the things that I learned in talking to people in Lafayette, where they did a very similar process, only using a different consultant, was that as you go through, you have to carefully track who attends all of these public meetings, so that as you go through the public meetings, you know which groups are represented and which groups aren't represented. And it's very important to keep track. And then, as you go from one meeting to the next, you can identify where the extra special efforts need to be made because someone hasn't shown up.
Good.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
And good luck.
Feel free to call or email anytime.
Thanks.
Well, we have 2 remaining items which, if there was a motion to defer.
I would move to defer those to our next committee meeting, and we'll get those on the agenda, and then we'd be able to take action on either.
Great. I think we'll be much more awake.
I agree.
Yes.
It's been 5.5 hours, so.
Yeah.
So is that motion seconded?
Second.
All those in favor of deferring the last 2 items of discussion on the agenda, please indicate by saying yes or aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, the motion passes. So item number 12, a discussion of affordable housing, inclusionary housing models, and a task force for public safety will be on the agenda in 2 weeks. I guess it's 2 weeks when the next committee of the whole meets.
Okay.
There being no further business for the committee tonight, I declare us adjourned.